Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the support tier list for 13.4. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. Streaming most nights starting around 9:30 or 10 p.m. these days. There may be some nights where I can't do it just because my schedule is pretty crazy these days, and sometimes I have to get up really early in the morning. But I'm going to try to stream at least 5 out of the 7 nights out of the week. I can say that'll probably happen most of the time. So come by, check it out. Unfortunately, can't be every single night these days, usually, but it'll be quite a bit. And I'm going to try to do some more content as well. I know I've been saying that for a while, but as far as like ADC tier lists and maybe individual sort of champion guides and stuff like that, I'm going to try to get back to doing some more of that for you guys too. But anyways, let's go ahead and get in here. I'm just going to skim the patch notes, just talk about what's relevant for support, because I think most people that watch the channel, that's, you know, they either play support or are most interested in support. But I'll just hit the patch notes just really quickly. The Ahri changes I think are good overall for Ahri. Still not going to be a great support pick. Alistar, they're increasing his healing and they're giving him extra AP ratios. They're really trying to push AP Alistar. I talked about this on stream, is that there's just not good like AP options for support really. I mean, he can go like Shirelia's, which in theory would be good on Alistar. I don't know if that actually translates into like a high win rate for him or not. He's still below 50%. People still get Locket. I feel like Locket is bad, but maybe I'm wrong about that. The problem with Shirellia is, yeah, it's a trap. It's really far below. You're just so squishy. Even with Alistar, yes, you do have your ult that makes you pretty much invulnerable for a little bit. It's just not enough. So as you can see, like his biggest items, none of them are AP. Well, you know, Frost Queens, this is something that I had thought with a lot of these things that got these AP ratio increases. The Nautilus, Alistar, maybe even Rakan could go something like Frost Queens, and then you get the extra 1-second root that you can chain together with the other CC. That sounds good, but the big issue is you're still just so squishy with this, right? Like, you've got the 250 HP, which is good, but you don't have any armor, you don't have any magic resist. So, in other words, I just think this is a fake buff. Now, maybe you see him in solo lanes, maybe, as like a top laner, AP top laner, like a Gragas type of champ, or maybe mid lane, but I just don't think you're going to see a lot of it. What he needs is lower cooldowns on his W and on his Q. That would be a good start. Or more base damage rather than AP damage. Like give his Q 20 more damage base or something like that. But anyway, it's not a huge deal. Okay, Amumu, health is down, armor is down, W does less damage. He's already, like, okay. He's not that great, I don't think, especially as support. I guess that's fine. He'll be even worse than he was. Okay, Anivia, a couple of nerfs. Probably not going to matter that much. Alright, Annie. Okay, now, Annie did have a really high win rate last patch, and I think that she is good this patch, and I don't know if I forgot to mention her, or maybe I just underestimated just how strong those buffs are going to be. I think I kind of had an asterisk and said keep an eye on Annie, but it ended up she's like really, really good. So I actually have her in A tier, and we'll talk about her a little bit more in a second. But they are nerfing the retaliation damage by a pretty significant amount, 25 at max rank, and this is what you would max. So that does matter. Then 10 extra seconds early on the ult and 20 later on the ult. So that is kind of a big deal. But she could still be pretty good, especially in solo queue in certain matchups. Aphelios getting a little bit more attack speed. I don't think this is a huge deal because I believe you choose the other stuff first. Typically with him, right? Don't you have like lethality stuff you can augment, or like flat AD? I think attack speed is probably the least popular one. So I think this would only be at like really late levels. So I'm not an expert on Aphelios, but I don't think it's going to matter. The Azir buff, or Azir change, is actually, I think, a pretty huge buff for all-in burst Azir. It just takes down his ability to trade early. So for pro, maybe that matters a little bit more, but in solo queue, I think this is a good thing for Azir, probably. Cho'Gath, mana cost reductions are good. He's still, it's kind of like Alistar-esque problems. He just has really long cooldowns, and in 2023, you know, there's just so many champions with much lower cooldowns that can trade more effectively than he can. So I don't think that's going to help him too much. I don't think he's like completely in the dumpster. I think he's playable in some matchups, but definitely not a support. Okay, Elise, damage down. This is nice. It's less pressure early, and they're nerfing Jarvan too a little bit. I think those champs will still be like viable for good players. but it's a lot less likely you're going to die to like a level 2 from them, or especially from Elise, like a level 3 dive, which doesn't happen as much in like Platinum and lower, but especially at higher elos, this could be a thing that can really matter. Okay, Jax. I'm not going to read all that, but they're like changing him. Basically, I think this is neutral / possibly a buff for Jax, because now his dodge damage affects the scaling, his bonus dodge damage. And the baseline, they're only lowering the AP ratio on it. And I don't think he goes AP that much. I mean, yeah, he could go like Nashor's or Hourglass or something, but I don't believe those are his strongest builds typically. So I think he's still going to be really strong. Okay, Malphite, few changes. Don't think it's a big deal. Maokai is actually doing more damage on his Q, a 7% increase, but then less damage on his Sapling Toss. So if you want to go tank Maokai, which I think has been doing better as support, that's the less fun option. The AP option's the fun one. But if you're going tank option, then that's actually a buff for him. Now, it's a longer cooldown on the sapling, so that does affect your ability to just spam them. But keep in mind, you are going to be getting cooldown reduction quite a bit on him. So, you know, it'll probably end up being about 10 seconds later on anyways, instead of like maybe the 7 seconds with the cooldown reduction it would be. That's fine. They are lowering the scaling a little bit based on your bonus AP. So, yeah, the Demonic Embrace build is going to be a little bit weaker, which that is, again, somewhat questionable as support, like the Leandries into Demonic. Like, that's fun, the Saplings of Doom. But I think that his tank build is still a really strong option with him, where you get, like, the Dead Man's Plate and the, just some of the tanking items that he has. Okay, Orianna changed. That's actually pretty good. Mana cost doesn't affect support, though. Riven's going to allow her to take towers better. Not going to matter that much. Samira, they're nerfing her a little bit. She's not played that much. I think she's underrated. She's actually pretty strong. But, you know, that's going to hurt her this ability to sustain through a bunch of damage while she's ulting. So that's probably fine. So now she'll probably just want to go the crit build rather than like BT second. She'll probably just go Infinity Edge second. And that might actually be better for her in the long run anyways. So I don't think that's a huge deal. So probably just like Shield Bow, Infinity Edge. Senna, a little bit of extra attack speed. That is nice, especially for AD Senna. For AP or for support, you're not getting that much attack speed typically. But you might get a little bit, and that can be good. And then lower cooldown on the ult is a big one, especially for support. So that's a nice little buff for Senna. Her win rate's ticked up a little bit. We'll talk about her in a little bit. Thresh, the Q damage is up by 20 at later ranks, which is good. Extra AP, which means the scaling on it's better. And the cooldown is lower at higher ranks. So that's pretty huge. 2 seconds, because it gets reduced by a flat 3. And this is going to get reduced by ability haste. So this is probably going to be down to like 6 seconds. And then if you hit your Q, it'll go down to like 3 seconds. So that's pretty nice. Dark Passage cooldown is down at earlier ranks and up at later ranks. That's probably fine. The base shield is down. Okay, so they want you to be more aggressive as Thresh. And then the Flay, same damage early, but scaling up to be more damage later. So they want you to do Q and then E max for bigger damage. I don't know if people will do that or if they'll still try to max W. There's definitely a much bigger incentive now to go Q and then E, more aggressive. And Thresh's win rate is up a little bit, so maybe he is going to come back into the meta a bit. Okay, Udyr, Veigar. Those are some meaningful changes, but I do want to get through because I am on a little bit of a limited time here. I've only got maybe 20 more minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes, just because I have to meet with some students and some conferences, but I did want to get this done. They are nerfing Relic Shield, and they are nerfing, or they're buffing the Relic Shield to help tanks sustain through poke a little bit more in lane, and then they're nerfing the poke things so that you can't get your stacks as fast, you can't get your wards as fast to stay safe with like your Luxes, your Ashes, these long-range poke champs, and you get less mana regen on your Luxes, you know, those types of champs. So you're going to have a couple less spells you can cast really early on. But most of the time, a lot of them are going for a Leandries or Ludens type of thing anyways. It's going to have a Lost Chapter, so that pretty much fixes any mana problems you could have once you get the Lost Chapter. So not a huge deal, I don't think. Runes, they're basically nerfing Treasure Hunter. You almost... there's a couple of supports maybe you get this on, like the AP type of supports. Maybe a Lux, maybe that type of thing. But you have to choose this instead of usually Ulti Hunter. And on most supports that have a really good engage, you want to use Ulti Hunter. Or even if you want to roam a lot, just getting the Roaming Hunter, whatever that thing is called that gives you the movement speed. So this is okay. It's really more of like a solo lane thing or a jungler thing. But it can still be alright. And then they are trying to adjust the jungle so you can't be ganked as much, or like it's a bigger opportunity cost to try to gank people early. Now I don't know how much this is actually going to matter, but the thing is, if you miss ganks, if you don't convert them to kills or get flashes or get something useful, then you're going to fall behind in the jungle. I think that's the TLDR of this. It's a lot harder to catch up with the catch-up experience. And then they're giving plus minus 22 LP, which is really, really good just for everybody, but doesn't impact the tier list at all. Okay, so first up, I've got Rakan. Should never be a surprise to anybody, but a lot of people are probably going to be on the Rakan train. I think a lot of people are late to this. I mean, I know, obviously, I'm a little biased for Rakan, but I think he's been really good for quite a while, even for the general population. He's had a 52% win rate pretty much all season, and that's historically very high for him. Even when he was very dominant in pro, his win rate was like 48, 49, maybe 50%, because he's really hard to play, right? The only support I would say is consistently harder to play than Rakan is probably Thresh. But there are a lot of decisions with Rakan. As I always say, you know, you got to choose how to sequence your abilities. If you get hit by CC, you're probably going to die with most builds. Now Analytics is going to call him #1 support. So it's like, you know, however many patches into the season, they finally are recognizing it. Now, he did obviously get very explicit buffs in the last patch, and that did help him out. So he has like a 53 or 54% win rate now. And it didn't seem like a big deal, but it kind of is. It's pretty much like the biggest one is that the Q heals you for 10 extra early, and that scales up to be a much bigger heal later on in the game. And this was last patch. They didn't buff him this patch. So everybody's at least one patch late on this, except for me. But I'm going to be right anyways. Anything about Rakan, because I'm always going to have him high. But that extra healing really helps him get through some of those early poke lanes. It not only heals him, but it heals his ally for quite a bit too. And they lowered the mana on it, so you can just spam it. Like every time it's off cooldown, you're not going to run out of mana. So they moved it from like 60 mana down to 45. And it has a 1 second lower cooldown. So this is what they nerfed back in the day, is they nerfed aspects of the Q in order to try to make his laning phase weaker, to try to nerf him out of pro, or at least make him less of a Grand Slam pick in pro. They just decided, okay, we want him to be weak early and to be extremely good later. Well, now they've reverted some of those changes. So it doesn't do as much damage, I don't think, as it used to do, but the cooldown is definitely lower. I think when he released, it was like 9 seconds. So it's longer than that, but it's cooler than it was, and it also gives you a better heal. And Xayah is also really good right now, so that's another thing that's helped him out, just with the changes to the Quick Blades and Infinity Edge. And a lot of those crit items were very good for her. So he's a top support. His obvious best laning partner, Xayah, is really good right now too. So that puts him in a really good spot. Now there are different itemization, and I won't hit on him too much because I talk about Rakan every night, because I play him all the time. But Shirelia's is still good. I've tried it out. Like, you are squishy on Shirelia's, and it's hard to quantify just how good this is because it doesn't put a number on it. Like, how many people you killed or how much extra damage your team did because they had the movement speed or whatever. So it's sort of hard to measure it, but it is still kind of a go-to strong item. I will say that Radiant is still, like, pretty good. It has a higher win rate. It's 3,200 gold, so that's quite expensive. But it's an extremely powerful effect when you get it. Now, Even Shroud is something else that I've been considering. It obviously has a low sample size here, but this was the go-to item for quite a while, and I don't think they ever nerfed it back. People just stopped buying it. So I'm not sure, but I think a lot of people forgot about this item. I think it's still quite good. It basically buffs all the damage by 10%. Now, that's if you immobilize someone or if they immobilize you. So then if you still get hit by a piece of CC, then your teammates will still get that bonus of doing a lot of extra damage. But the nice part about this is you get the 30 armor and 30 magic resist. So you're going to be a lot more resilient. It's a lot less likely you're going to die. Rakan scales really well with armor and magic resist because that buys him time so that he doesn't die while he's chain CC'd, and then he can almost always get out if he's not CC'd. So all you're trying to do with Rakan and resistances is just survive the 3 seconds of CC, and then you're good. Then they're never going to catch you because you're going to W or E out or whatever. So that extra 30 armor and magic resist is a really nice addition if you can pick it up. So obviously Shirelia's doesn't have that. Locket does have it, but Locket is by and large a trap. He has an okay win rate on it, but it is lower than his other items. The numbers are just too low on it. You'll see this across the board on most other tanks, is that almost all of the major tanks would be better off with either Radiant Virtue or Even Shroud rather than Locket. I have tried the AP variants. I haven't been super impressed with that. Aside from Mage Eyes, I have talked about that quite a bit. He's really, really good with Mage Eyes if you can, you know, obviously not die. But if you're able to do things like pick up the Even Shroud and just position well and not get caught, he scales extremely well with AP. Like, his Q is, I think the damage portion is a 0.7 or a 0.8. The heal is similarly very high. His passive shield that he gets is like a 0.95, which means every point of AP is basically like an extra point of HP as well as a bonus on top. And then his E shield is like 0.7 each. So that's a 1.4 total shield you can put out, which is massive. And then his W has a pretty good ratio. It's like a 0.7 or a 0.8. Very, very good AP scaling. The problem is you can't get a lot of AP without being too greedy and skipping on the resistances. That is one bonus of Shirelia's, is it does have AP on it versus something like Even Shroud. Another option, and this has a lower win rate, but Imperial Mandate I've been trying out, and I think that especially for kind of smaller fights, this might actually do more damage total than Even Shroud would. And you get the AP off of it, so if you do want the book early, if you do want the Amp Tome to help you sort of snowball your lane and you want to turn it into Imperial Mandate instead of Shirelia's, if your team already has enough engage, then this could be a nice option. And it does have the 15 extra ability power per mythic, so that is really good. That's going to be an extra 30 ability power versus something like 5 haste, right, or 10 haste if you have 2 of these. So the scaling on it is far better. If you think you're going to get a bunch of smaller items, like if you're going to get a Mage Eyes and you can protect that, or you're going to get like a Putrefier or something like that, it can be pretty good. So as usual, lots of different build options. Don't forget Mercs. Don't be greedy and always get the Ionians. You need to get Mercs in a lot of matchups. If you see Morgana or Lux or Vhagar, any of that crap that has like a 2+ second CC chain, you need to get Mercs, okay? I know it sucks like not getting Ionians, but I've fallen into that trap several times. You greed out, you're like, well, they just have, it's just Maokai on their team. Like, they don't have that much other CC. If it's a big heavy hitter CC, you need to get Mercs, okay? They are very strong in a lot of situations. But I probably wouldn't go for the other boots in most situations. Okay, let's speed up a little bit here because, again, I do want to make sure that I get through a few of these other champs, so we're running out of time. Okay, Sona, not that much has really changed with Sona. Still the same thing. She's really good with the Seraphs, Rod of the Ages build. Her win rate's like 52.5% or something percent. Now, she has great harassment in the early game. She has really good scaling in the late game, but she's very vulnerable. So you have to make sure you're buying those control wards. You're putting your control wards in good spots. And ideally, you do not want to play on the weak side with Sona. In other words, you don't want to play on the side that the jungler's going to camp. And unfortunately, junglers camp bottom a lot. So Sona is great if you're a later pick as well, and you can see that you have other winning lanes, so that it's less likely the jungler is just going to sit on you the whole game. And then if you can sort of establish a lead early for yourself and your ADC and just play safe, then she does scale really well later on into the game. Okay, and then I have Blitzcrank up here too. I don't know if he necessarily deserves to be an S, especially with things like Xayah coming back into the meta. Xayah's a weird one because she can dodge Blitz, but usually she has to use her ult. If she goes Gale Force is a really easy way to dodge the hook. And there are more tanks coming back into the meta. So you've got your Leona, your Nautilus. Rakan's very good against Blitz. But nevertheless, I think there are still several really good matchups for him. He's very good in a Caitlyn. He's very good in a Jhin. Both of them don't have great natural ways to dodge what he's doing. Again, if they do have Gale Force, that's going to hurt you. But you do have a window there in the early game where you can take advantage of that. He's also extremely good in a Thresh. And Thresh has become the most popular support again. So when Thresh tries to throw his hook, he basically stuns himself for a half a second and has a wind-up animation and then throws it. If you see that as Blitz and then you hook him, so you hook him at the same time he's trying to hook the ADC, or you hook him at the same time he hooks you, your hook is way stronger and you're going to win that fight most of the time. So your hook does a lot more damage and you have a lot more burst with your knock-up and then your ultimate. So typically, historically, that's been seen as a very strong, like, Blitz-favored matchup into Thresh. Okay, and then Thresh is kind of coming back. I mentioned that before. He's mostly getting damage on his Q and his E. Now, again, I'm not sure if people are going to be maxing E that much. It looks like people are, maxing E second. So that's pretty good. And mobility boots, I'm kind of torn on that because, like, yes, it does allow you to roam around and potentially make plays. He's not the greatest roamer. He's okay, but you still have to hit your hook, right? You can't just run in and, like, ult somebody like you can with Leona or Nautilus. You have to actually hit a skill shot. I mean, I guess you can flash in and flay, but I was going to say I think Ionians are better in a lot of situations because, again, you want that cooldown reduction on your Q because it just gets a huge bonus because you get a flat 3-second reduction whenever you hit your Q. So the lower the baseline is, it starts to move closer to no cooldown towards infinity on him, basically. So if you can, you're not going to be able to do it, but theoretically, if you could get him at a 3-second cooldown and he hits the hook, there would be no cooldown on the hook, right? So I don't know what the term is for that, but it scales really hard. The closer you get to the number 3, the more that it's going to be up mathematically over time. So, cooldown reduction, extremely good on Thresh is the bottom line. So that's why I think Ionians is what I would do most of the time. Unless you're just going to absolutely abandon the lane and just sit on mid or something, then maybe Mobies. And then other than that, again, lock it as a trap. I think that Righteous or Radiant here is going to be your play. It's a full 6% higher win rate. It's just very good on tanks. He really needs those stats too. He really needs the health and the extra armor because he is one of the squishier tanks out there because of his soul system. But Even Shroud is also good. If you do want to take advantage of that extra AP scaling, you can do Shurelya's. That is good for getting your team in there, trying to get those fights, looking for that flay first, and then into hook if you are ahead, if they're not going to blow you up when you just run at them face first. That can be a pretty strong option. So several build options, very similar to Rakan in that respect. He's really flexible. He can do offense. He can do defense. He's one of the best supports of all time in terms of his design in the hands of a strong player. So I think Thresh is great. I love to see him back in the meta again. It's always a really fun matchup, Thresh versus Rakan. I think they're fairly evenly matched. Okay, so Annie, still really strong. We talked about that. You just want to go shield max if you want to try Annie out. Really good, like, consistent all-in level 6. Just does an absolute truckload of damage with Tibbers early on, especially if the jungler's not involved. Remember, the jungler can smite Tibbers, which is bad news bears, pun intended. But, yeah, that's bad if the jungler's there. But if you can find some spots where the jungler is not there, that extra HP on Tibbers is a really big deal early on. You just want to go with the Shurelya's, Ionians, of course. You can do Sorks on her. It's probably a lower win rate. It's just having Tibbers up more often is more powerful than just having a stronger, like, burst window with Tibbers, because your damage itself is going to fall off pretty hard with this build, especially if you're maxing shield, which is what most people are doing. So you just want your abilities up as much as possible. So yeah, Ionians, Shurelya's to get you to run in there and your team to find those ultimates. And then Rylai's is particularly good with most pet champions, including Tibbers, because it permanently applies a slow whenever they're within the burn aura range of the Tibbers. So, really good champ overall. Nice burst. I'm still not entirely sold on Aerie. I don't know about that. I guess your only other option would really be Arcane Comet, and I guess Aerie is better than that. So, I don't know. I'm not an Annie expert, but I think she's still good if you do want a champ that does offer some protection to your team, but also has an extremely strong team fight with the R and very consistent like brawling with your R as well. And Tibbers can help you take down towers too. It can eat at least a few tower shots if you go in with it. If you go in on a cannon wave, it can probably do quite a bit of damage. If the tower aggroes the cannon first and then you have Tibbers start hitting it, it probably adds quite a bit of extra damage. So Annie going to be pretty strong. Leona, not a lot has changed here. They did just buff Relic Shield, so that is going to give you a bit more sustain in the lane. She didn't receive any buffs whenever they buffed a lot of the support tanks a couple of patches ago, so that was kind of sad. But she still does have really low cooldowns overall, only 90 seconds on her ult at level 6, and she can engage through a minion wave, so it makes it very difficult for the enemy to position well to stay out of her engage. So that's why I like her. I think she's just consistently can go in, kill people, and she can hard snowball, right? Because if you're behind, you can't even step up to the wave, right? If they have kill threat on you, if you don't have sums, and you're against something like a Draven, Jhin, Xayah, even Caitlyn, just anything that can chain CC or do a ton of damage in the early game, Leona's going to be strong. Now, you do have to be careful with her because she has no reverse gear. She can be ganked very easily and killed, but she is very tanky. She can put her head down and stay down in a fight, and she has really low cooldowns on her CC, so she can continually reapply Qs, reapply Es, so that's very strong. And on that note, I would definitely go for Even Shroud on her, just because it's going to be up all the time. Like, anytime you CC somebody, it adds that extra 10% damage to everybody within a large radius, and she has some of the lowest cooldown CC in the game. So I suspect that's going to be one of the best. Now, Radiant might still be pretty strong on her, just because the stats are, excuse me, kind of crazy. So yeah, Radiant's still good. It is a higher win rate, so you can try that. It is more expensive, but again, Even Shroud is particularly really good on her, just because of how often she can reapply it. And then Nautilus, still going to be strong. He did get some direct buffs. I think they buffed his E, so he does a lot more damage in team fights. He has a lot more wave clear, so now you want to go E max, then Q, then W. They lowered the base mana cost on the W, so that it's a lot easier to use it to reset your autos, to, you know, get extra last hits on wards and all that kind of stuff. So he still is squishier than most of the other major tanks, especially something like a Leona. Because his steroid, his shield is really weak, and you don't max it early, and his baseline armor is much lower. It's like 37 versus Leona's 44. But he has a really fat hitbox on that hook. It's easy to engage. His ultimate is very consistent. It's virtually impossible to dodge. Gale Force is not going to help him. Ezreal's Blink is not going to help him. You know, if they get over a wall or something, maybe that can be all right, but by and large, your ult is going to hit people the vast majority of the time. They can't outplay it as much as they can outplay something like a Leona or a Maokai ult in a team fight. So it's really, really good. So Nautilus still going to be quite a strong champ. Maokai, we talked about him before. They did nerf the seeds, but his ultimate is still like at least going to hit one person virtually guaranteed in a team fight for a really long piece of CC. And in solo queue where everyone's is going to be split up and running around and is not going to stack up behind the tank. The team may not even have a tank on the enemy side to soak that Bramble. He's going to be really strong. And then just the point-click W, similar to Nautilus, virtually impossible to dodge. It's really strong. You got to make sure you don't get pulled under tower with that in the laning phase where they flash and pull you under tower with the W. But outside of that, it's a really powerful ability. And they did increase the damage on his Q by quite a bit early on too. So still going to be a strong, versatile option. And then Senna, like we talked about before, I think is going to become one of the better pressure champs. You can still do Ashe if you want. You can still do Lux. Like, those are good. I could definitely see an argument to put them in tier 2 instead of Senna. But overall, I don't know. Maybe I'm just optimistic that maybe she comes back in the meta. I shouldn't be optimistic because she's very good into Rakan. Historically, there was a few months there, I think it was last season, where she was a complete nightmare when she was kind of overbuffed as support. But I still think she's pretty good, scales well, obvious, good user of Umbral, all that kind of stuff. So maybe it's optimistic, maybe she should be tier 3, but she's still okay. And that's pretty much it. I knocked Ashe down here a little bit. She only has a 50% win rate, so it's pretty low. I know people like the arrow, but with more tanks coming back into the meta now, there aren't as many good arrow targets. Yeah, like if you hit Leona for 3 seconds of CC, like that's still good, but it's not as good as hitting Lux or Nami or Lulu or whatever, because the tanks are kind of coming back. Enchanters are still there, people are playing them, but a lot more people are shifting back towards the tanks overall, and a lot of this is because a lot of pro players are probably doing it. There are still quite a few enchanters, so it's really just Thresh that's becoming popular again, and then Nautilus. So there's still quite a few targets out there. But for me, with Ashe, she's just early game pressure. She's an arrow late game, but if the enemy takes cleanse, or they get Mikhail's, or they get Gale Force, and they have hands and can dodge, it's just so conditional on that one ability. Can you hit it? And it's a skill shot that's highly visible. So it's just a skill check on a lot of people. It is good. I mean, obviously, if you're in brush or something, you hit people with the arrow, it's nice. But I just think in solo queue, where you don't have the coordination, where you're not going to be able to snowball your lead in the early game as easily at most elo brackets, I just feel like it's not going to be as strong as some of the other options. But maybe I'm wrong. I could definitely see an argument for her being tier 2. Similar with Karma, early pressure, kind of falls off later, has a bit more utility than Ashe in terms of speeding people up in shields, but she doesn't have the engage. I really favor engage champions. I think if you want to play something that's high pressure early that scales better, especially at like gold and lower, maybe even platinum and lower, I would just go with Sona over Karma. I think they're trying to do very similar things. Soraka is another one. I would just do Sona over Soraka. I think they're similar, but Soraka is just more consistent. It's going to scale better. Lux does have engage, is good pressure early, has good vision later, but her numbers just kind of fall off. She just doesn't do as much damage, and her CC is just not as reliable late game. But again, she's okay. And then Dinger is the other one that's like a super poke champion, pretty high skill cap. He's been nerfed several times. He does push really well early, but I just think he's not quite as strong as he was a few patches ago. And then that's pretty much it. I'm still not a believer. I don't think we've seen any of these weird champs again, like consistently, like the Jhin bottom, Caitlyn support bottom, like that kind of stuff that people were asking about a few patches ago. So yeah, I'd probably just stick with the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 if you're looking to climb, unless you just specifically one-trick something like Vel'Koz and you have a 60% win rate. I'd just probably stick with these if you want to climb. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.